Before we begin, I would like to just take a moment to acknowledge that York University is situated on land that has, that's where Dr. This is on land that has had the presence of many indigenous nations over the years. This area known as Toronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat, and is now home to many First Nation and Native communities. The current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and we would like to also acknowledge that territory is subject to provisional points to the involved without the covenant, which is an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. We're delighted today to have three speakers. I'm going to very briefly do their introduction. Their longer biographies are in the invitation that you received. Hazal Goktas is a postdoctoral visitor at York University who is working for the 2SLGBTQ plus poverty in Canada, improving livelihood and social wellbeing project. Roya Haghiri-Vijeh is an assistant professor and researcher at the School of Nursing. And Mulé is professor in the School of Social Work, cross-appointed to the Sexuality Studies program in the School of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies, the Department of Sociology, and the Faculty of Health at University. They're going to be speaking today about the experiences of LGBTQ plus migrants, preliminary findings from the 2SLGBTQ plus poverty in Canada study. Please join me in welcoming our speakers today.
And if you could just speak up.
Thank you so much, Michaela and Michelle, for having us and including us in your seminar series. This is a great opportunity for us to share some preliminary findings and welcome all that are joining us today. Our title is Experiences of LGBTQ plus Migrants, Preliminary Findings from the 2SLGBTQ plus Poverty in Canada study. I also want to thank the previous land acknowledgement that we heard, and I won't repeat that here, but it's always important to recognize that. I will state that as a project, we do take that into consideration at all fronts, and in consultation with an Indigenous elder as well. We also want to recognize that this is Black History Month, and part of our work as an intersectional project, we take into consideration race and ethnicity in all we do. Quite a quick overview of the project itself, and what we hope to present to you today in the seminar. There will be a bit about the project, then we'll follow that with Migration Poverty Working Group. This is a particular working group within the project. Some key terms that we will be using, dimensions of poverty that we're focusing on, claim process, temporariness and limbo, recognition of work experience and education, housing and health, community support in diaspora, anti-immigrant sentiments. Then we will conclude with recommendations and our content information. Funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada through their partnership grant envelope. So just a bit about the project. We are the first national study examining the prevalence and effects of poverty on 2SLGBTQ plus populations in Canada. There have been some smaller projects that have taken place, research studies across the country, but never at the national level. We were fortunate enough to receive $2.5 million from SHIRC, from the partnership grant. And our membership on our research team, what you see on the slide is 94. This changes by day. We're roughly about 100 people on the research team.
I'm really sorry, Nick. I have to interrupt for a minute. We have a sound problem.
Oh.
So let me just pause for a minute. Okay.
Okay, great. I will start at the top again then. Thanks everyone for your patience. Just give me a second so I can get that in place. All right. Welcome again to the seminar. We thank the organizers for it. Michaela for the introductions, Michelle for organizing all of this. Uh, what we're presenting on is experiences of LGBTQ plus migrants, preliminary findings from the 2S LGBTQ plus poverty in Canada study. And Michaela did provide us with the land acknowledgement, which is great because that is always important to recognize as we do in this project. We work very closely with an Indigenous elder that assists us with decolonization approaches. Also, this month is Black History Month, which we take seriously as well in our intersectionality work with regard to race and ethnicity. Just an overview of what we're presenting today. Will include some information about the project, Migration and Poverty Working Group, a specific working group that we will be speaking to you about today in terms of the preliminary data. Some key terms that we use, dimensions of poverty, claim process of temporariness and limbo, recognition of work experience and education, housing and health, community support in diaspora, anti-immigrant sentiments, and we'll conclude with recommendations and our contact information. We just want to acknowledge our funder, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, that has funded this project. So a little more about us. This is the first national study examining prevalence and effects of poverty on 2S LGBTQ plus populations in Canada. There have been smaller projects and research studies that have taken place throughout the country, but this is the first that has happened from coast to coast to coast. Our project membership is what you see on the slide is 94. We're actually roughly at about 100. This number does fluctuate daily, and we're at about 100 people on the research team. Most of us based here in Canada. We also have people that are located in the US and the UK. The award we received from SSHRC is, which we're really grateful for, $2.5 million from their partnership grant. We received this in the spring of 2022. The study is designed for 6 years, and we will more than likely make use of the 7th extended year that will take us to 2029. Our project goal is to create evidence-based knowledge on how and why poverty affects 2S LGBTQ plus communities in Canada to inform policy and community-based action to address existing inequities. We have 4 objectives. First is documentation and the importance of doing so. As mentioned previously, this is the first study at a national level, so the presence of these communities in national dialogues with regard to anti-poverty is not very pronounced. And so through our research, we're hoping to make it more pronounced that these communities also experience this and the particular ways that it's experienced within. By doing so, we're meeting the objective of inclusion, and that is to have anti-poverty work be inclusive of these communities. Through our work, we intend to produce a series of outputs for knowledge exchange at the community level, meaning the 2S LGBTQ plus communities, mainstream society, the public sector in terms of policymakers, politicians, and with the effects of an action plan that calls for better funding, programming, and services. Our work is a community-based participatory action research. This involves working with community organizations doing anti-poverty work and/or serving the 2S LGBTQ plus communities. Each of our project teams are co-chaired by community representatives and academics. Our community advisory board is made up of geographically represented 2S LGBTQ plus individuals, currently or with a history of living with poverty. And our data gathering has been carried out by peer researchers in addition to academics from the 2S LGBTQ plus communities with experience of poverty across Canada.
Hello, everyone. Just before I start, can everyone hear me? Because I'm not connected to Zoom on my computer, so I wanted to make sure people can hear me.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Again, hello, everyone. My name is Hazal Goktas, and I'm a postdoctoral visitor at the 2SLGBTQ plus Poverty in Canada project. I am also chairing the LGBTQ plus migrants and poverty working group within this project, which is the subgroup that conducted focus groups from which we are presenting our preliminary findings to you today. Since the initial stages of the project, our team members wanted to hold focus groups as one of the qualitative data collection tools. The initial focus groups were designed to be geographical location based that would be held in each province and territory. We are still committed to and working towards doing that. However, even before I joined the project, some of our team members already acknowledged that we might need special attention to certain sociodemographics that are at particular social locations or holding specific identities, such as trans people, seniors, indigenous peoples, people with disabilities, and so on. Migration and Poverty Working Group was born out of this necessity to attend to the complexities of migrant LGBTQ plus experiences. As a trans woman who came to this country as an international student, but also due to the diminishing life chances back in my home country, Turkey, I grew familiar with the limitations and challenges of being at this particular intersection from a first-hand experiences. Not just me, of course, almost all of my colleagues in this working group either have some sort of migration experience and or worked with migrants and displaced people. In addition to our own experiences and previous work within a rising reactionary political climate that target LGBTQ plus people as well as migrants, understanding the poverty experiences of people who have to navigate the world being both LGBTQ plus and migrant have increasingly become an issue of great importance. Okay. So in this slide, you see the members of our working group. With this, I would like to also acknowledge the contributions of our amazing research assistants, Bogdan, Fatih, and Patricia, for their contributions to this presentation as well. Okay. So we decided to hold focus groups in 3 major urban centers in Canada that comparatively have more resources and services and therefore are more of a hub for LGBTQ plus immigrants. At this stage, we completed all of our planned focus groups. The first one took place on November 20, 2024 in Vancouver with the organization Mosaic BC and their I Belong program. After collaborating with them on this focus group, we established a formal partnership with Mosaic BC. The second focus group took place in Toronto on March 27, 2025, in collaboration with our existing community partner, the 519, and with their new
Sorry, we lost Hazal's sound. We can't hear anything at this time.
Is that better?
Yes, back.
Yeah.
You're back.
Leave it on.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, how much? Okay.
I think it just cut off.
Okay.
Now.
All right, then I'm proceeding. Sorry about that. We were also going to hold our focus group with the English-speaking migrants with the help of LGBTQ plus Community Center and in a space provided by University of Quebec in Montreal. However, we had a roadblock there, which delayed the completion of our final focus group a few more months. Finally, we conducted our very last focus group a couple of months ago in November 2025, once again in Montreal, this time with English-speaking migrants, and we were hosted by one of our existing community partners, LGBT plus Family Coalition. These focus groups are conducted by two co-facilitators, always led by one academic, and we also received assistance from our peer researchers and research assistants, either in the form of co-facilitating the focus groups or helping us with the logistics. So let's look at some of the key terms. We use the abbreviation LGBTQ+. LGBTQ+ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning. And gender identities and expressions beyond those explicitly listed. In the Canadian context, this project uses the term 2SLGBTQ+ to recognize two-spirit people, acknowledging the unique identities and roles of Indigenous peoples in Canada-occupied land. However, we shall use the term LGBTQ+ in the context of migration to Canada. In their 2021 scoping review, Knowledge and Policy about LGBTQI Migrants, Lee et al. Defined migrant in the Canadian context as those who arrive in Canada as permanent residents, refugees, economic class, family class, etc., or with precarious status, visitors, temporary workers, international students, refugee claimants, undocumented, etc. Our focus group recruitment criteria align with this definition. To date, many of our participants are refugee claimants, but also we have people from other migration experiences as well. And of course, the term poverty. In this project, poverty refers to any current or past experience of not having enough or just getting by. This may include a lack of money, employment, food, adequate housing, or other essential resources. This is an open and evolving definition. During fieldwork, we explore participants' preferred language to describe their experiences. So far, our focus group participants included people that self-identified as trans women and men, gay and bisexual men, queer, gay women, and non-binary and agender people. The focus group participants came from a wide range of countries, including Ghana, Ivory Coast, Morocco, Somalia, Sudan, Uganda, China, Japan, Pakistan, Syria, France, the UK, Cuba, Guatemala, Trinidad and Tobago, Argentina, Colombia, and Peru. And some of them also lived in other countries before coming to Canada as well. And they also come from all walks of life in terms of their professions, their jobs before and after coming to Canada. I remember one of the focus group participants saying, "Nothing for us without us." And this is exactly what we are aiming to do here. We're trying to amplify the voices of people whose problems, to quote Kimberly Crenshaw, can fall through the cracks. especially in a country like Canada, which is known as this LGBTQ plus friendly country or country welcoming of immigrants. The problems that LGBTQ plus migrants experience are often seen as their own failures, their own incompetence, laziness, or inability to integrate into a system. While one can argue that this individual responsibilization is a general feature of neoliberalism, within the current political landscape, this has more repercussions for LGBTQ plus migrants. Throughout our focus groups, our participants tell us time and time again the systemic barriers they face in education, employment, healthcare, the racism and xenophobia they experience, and the shortcomings of services and service providers that are meant to help them.
Thank you so much, Nick and Hazal, for sharing these. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I'm not there with you in person. My name is Roya Haghiri-Vijeh, and my pronouns are she and her, as was discussed. And
No, I think
Roya is speaking, but we cannot.
but it's muted.
you cannot hear me?
We can't hear. Okay, hold on. Okay, so now, Nick, can you please mute yourself?
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Are you able to, others online, are you able to hear me? Yes? Okay. All right. Let's try this. Isn't it just so much fun, right? The love of technology. So I'll start again. I just want to say hi, everyone. I'm sorry I'm not with you in person, but maybe it's good I'm online. So I have an insider-outsider experience of what's occurring. My name is Roya Haghiri-Vijeh, and my pronouns are she and her. And it has been my utmost pleasure being involved in this work that's been directed by Nick and the rest of the team and all our wonderful PhD students and master students. The whole team has been wonderful. I also want to acknowledge that as we move forward, I'll try to speak slowly. So just in case, I've been having some, you gotta love this, internet issues, some hotspotting on my phone, and my neighbor is sitting at a corner who's very safe and affirming as a backup, so we can hotspot on her phone is as needed. But it will all work out. That's what I tell my children. It's all work out. It will work out. For accessibility reason, I don't know if it was mentioned or not. If you need caption, closed caption, please activate this as we move forward. And I just want to pause here and share that some of the experiences that we're going to share with you, some of the examples that we're going to be sharing with you, you may have some of those lived or living experiences. And some of the examples may be a little bit sensitive for some of us. So if you need to turn your camera off to go for a walk or get fresh air or leave the room and come back, just know we're not going to get offended in any shape or form. And we have social workers, we have nurses, we have psych majors in this room. So if not that we're going to give you a consultation, but if you need to just check in after the presentations, please feel free to do so. So as we delve into some of the findings, our overall project has identified four dimensions of poverty: income and employment and education, housing, food security and insecurity, health, healthcare, social services access. But because we also are the subgroup of this whole team and we're focusing on migration, we couldn't leave claim process out. And just to give you and perhaps share this as well, we don't have enough time to give you all the examples, all the stats. So we're just going to give you, as Nick said, some examples, some of those findings, and I encourage you to get added to our newsletter, mailing list. So when more publications, more findings come that you may find helpful for your teaching, for your organizations, we can share those with you. So having said that, would you please go to the next slide? And of course, we're going to start with the claim process. And this slide was prepared by Fatih and Bogdan. And an overarching findings from the focus groups was that when asked about their experience of poverty and a lack of resources, LGBTQI migrants often describe challenges that there are direct consequences of the Canadian immigration system, its policies and practices. For instance, participants spoke extensively about the uncertainty and hardships they face in accessing education, employment, and essential services during the refugee claim process and even afterwards. It didn't stop there. The afterwards continued. They had to juggle making their claims, applying for work permit, and working hard to either have their credentials and work experiences recognized or pursue new, more affordable and feasible credentials such as certificates. This suggests that despite migrating on humanitarian grounds, LGBTQI+ refugee claimants experience similar precarity and temporariness as those who enter Canada through temporary foreign work program as low-skilled migrant workers. Armita Harry 2013, this is a study that we have here, is one of the few scholars who has explored the shared experiences of those two seemingly distinct migration categories. Harry 2013 argues that both low-skilled temporary foreign workers and refugee claimants are positioned at the lower end of the social hierarchy in Canada with limited rights and entitlements, leading to negative social and economic consequences. Both groups face restricted access to services and permanent residency. And I'm going to just repeat this for you again. So both groups are facing restricted access to services and permanent residency. While temporary foreign workers are vulnerable due to employer dependency, refugee claimants, especially those from designated countries, face detention and limited health care access. Precarious living conditions and family separation further reinforces their temporary and excluded status in Canadian society. A participant in a Vancouver focus group shared, well, I've been here for 4 months as a refugee claimant and I received a work permit. I'm struggling to get a permanent job. I got some jobs, but one of them like temporary job, like I work when they call me, so like 2 days a week, installation. And then I'm working with a lady, but she's a good coworker and she's really helpful. In the beginning, it's very hard to get the experience, especially because refugee claimants were not allowed like to study or to be specific in some field. So we get certificates like first aid certificates and something like that to help. And we have heard that also in some of the other presentations that CRS has put forward. Another participant in Toronto, the Toronto Focus Group, who holds a master's degree from their country, shared that they were told to return to high school because their high school diploma nor their university degrees were recognized in Canada. This is quite insulting, right? Somebody who already has a master's degree, for them to go back to high school and get another degree. And we see and hear this over and over again. And then it's the whole status part. Now it also keeps you there because sometimes the decision is going to take much longer and you're going to have to wait, and sometimes it comes quicker. But unless you have permanent residency, you're gonna have to either pay international fees or you're gonna have to wait. So even that means if your decision takes 2 years, you're going to wait for 2 years. You're still either struggling to get survival or get something to do, or you're living off Ontario Works only so it keeps you in that limbo for some time. That's the notion of limbo that is coming forward. So fortunately, this participant was able to find a university bridging program, which allowed them to avoid returning to high school. However, many temporary residents are not eligible even for such programs. Many scholars like Lee et al., Nick, who's also there, has done some work, Khan and Alice, they shared with us, they've shown that beyond temporariness, the refugee claim process itself imposes significant financial and emotional burdens on LGBTQI plus claimants. And sometimes they've been asked for lump sum of money to be given. These are given to the so-called consultations or consultants or lawyers and so forth with no outcome. The process can also, and it's been over and over discussed in research and findings, is re-traumatizes the claimants and hinders their ability to focus on securing housing, employment, and other necessities. For transgender and gender nonconforming refugees, the lack of access to gender-affirming documentation further complicates their ability to navigate the refugee system and secure stable employment. Next slide, please. So the transition into Canadian employment market is marked by a variety of barriers. For example, in their research on gay Latino immigrants, Adam and Rangel 2017 observed that while their study participants arrived at significant cultural capital, they found themselves underemployed and underpaid in Canada due to the lack of recognition of their prior work experience. In their study, they found that half of the participants had an income of less than $20,000 per year. This is like really low as we think about it. Drawing on Bourdieu's notion of cultural capital, Karimi 2020 observes that cultural practices and educational credentials in particular are institutionalized, protected, and evaluated differently by institutions and employers. End of quote. In their research on Iranian gay immigrants and refugees in Canada, Karimi points out that university degrees are the most important form of cultural capital. However, this neoliberal approach to social capital remains focused primarily on short-term support programs such as drafting resumes and cover letters for the tertiary job market rather than on building long-term capital, cultural capital. Next slide, please. Some institutions may recognize prior experience, yet still require applicants to obtain Canadian experience. So if they were only just beginning, so as if they were just only beginning their careers. So many participants arrived with significant skills, degrees, and experiences, but quickly found that those credentials were devalued. Foreign degrees, and we're very careful when we use the word foreign, were now recognized, and employers demanded Canadian experience, effectively shutting them out. A participant noted that certificates from the global north carried more weight than university degrees from the global south. This not only limits employment, but erodes a sense of self-worth as people are forced to start over despite being highly qualified. In the next slides, I'm going to talk about housing and health. What emerged was not just a story about housing scarcity, but about how deeply the search for shelter is shaped by identity-based exclusions. Participants didn't simply struggle to find affordable housing, they were navigating a landscape where their race, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, and immigration status determined whether they were even considered eligible for a place to live. Landlords asked invasive questions and made assumptions based on accent or appearance, and in some cases, abruptly ended conversations upon learning a participant's country of origin or identity. These are not isolated incidents. We also noticed the same experiences in Montreal focus groups. They reveal systemic patterns of exclusion that are embedded in the everyday operations of the housing market. In order to survive, participants described having to modify how they spoke, how they dressed, even how they named or concealed parts of themselves, performing a version of respectability they believed might make them more rentable. One participant spoke of dressing more femininely just to get a room. Another shared that despite offering full payment, they were rejected purely based on race and religion. These acts of self-erasure are not about preference or choice. They are about survival. And they point to a broader truth: the housing crisis for LGBTQI+ refugee and newcomers and migrants isn't only about supply, it's about the structural and interpersonal forces that determine who gets access to stability and who is further pushed to the margins. The emotional, physical, and psychological cost of constantly negotiating one's identity just to secure a roof over one's head cannot be overstated. Next slide, please. Despite Canada's policies, commitment, access to care remains deeply unequal and often out of reach, especially for LGBTQ+ refugees and newcomers. Participants in our focus group shared that before arriving in Canada, for some, depending on their settlement process, they were promised some healthcare and mental health support. But when they got here, none of that materialized. No support, no access to medications. Like some of them said, don't even get us started on finding a family doctor. Like, how difficult is it to find a family doctor? And even when they tried to seek basic medical care, like a blood test for serious health conditions, they couldn't get it without a referral, which they couldn't get without a family doctor. This isn't just a failure of follow-through. It's a systemic gap that's well documented in the literature. Ross et al. 2018 highlights how even when LGBTQ+ individuals manage to engage with healthcare system, it's often fragmented, culturally incompetent, and alienating. In my previous work with LGBTQI+ migrants, with healthcare professionals and nurses, similarly, we found not only culturally incompetent, we also found discrimination, stigma, invasive questions were asked, making comments around people's identities, making assumptions about the client's status. So these keep coming up over and over again. So when the government launches action plan like the 2SLGBTQI+ federal action plan, acknowledging disparities in mental health and access to care, it is important to ask, what happens after the press release? Because for many of people we spoke with, these promises are still just that, promises. Ramage 2021 underscores this too, pointing out that queer immigrants, even those arriving through official programs, face multiple layers of exclusion that prevent them from accessing meaningful and affirming care. And when we talk about affirming care, it's affirming of gender expression and identity, of affirming of their sexual orientation, affirming of their migration status, and being affirming of their intersecting identities that Hazal earlier on pointed out too. Next slide, please. So we see these two quotations that speak directly to the everyday realities of exclusion that many LGBTQI+ refugees and newcomers face. As someone that we heard, and as members of our team who have at some point had experienced housing insecurity, we hear these words that are frustration that are coming through. whether it's a shelter that offers no guidance or a landlord who hangs up on the phone at the mention of your background, these are the moments that reveal how deeply discrimination is woven into the search for stability. And I'll read one of these quotations for you. I'm very mindful of time. Because sometimes when we don't feel accepted because our first point of contact, people like us, right? Like, for example, you're a refugee, you start in a shelter and where you're going to find fellow refugees and newcomers, and they don't give you like information that you might need, and that limits you in terms of employment and where you will find work. You're working for, and what is it called? Like minimum wage. The minimum wage, finding housing in Toronto is a challenge. Next slide, please. Having spoken about some of those experiences, we also want to talk about community support. And community support may include both formal and informal support. One of the challenges was that some of the grassroots organizations don't have funding and financial support in order to be able to provide meaningful support for LGBTQ plus newcomers. As a participant in Toronto said, it's because some of us who are doing this work, this community work, we're just at grassroots. And we're supporting people of, 2SLGBTQ newcomers who are in that bracket, who are poor, in the poverty bracket, of which we also don't have the support. If you don't get the support to support newcomers, that means we're going to continue being under poverty as support for years and years. In the next example, if participants shared how some organizations would actually protect their own staff because they're the insiders and LGBTQI migrants are the outsider. And this brings us to consider how some organizations that are designed to support LGBTQ plus people, migrants, and or LGBTQI plus migrants may further perpetuate exclusion and intensify unbelonging and discrimination. And this participants from Vancouver shared, when you report stuff, they ridicule it and you're made fun of, and you're like, oh, I've received like fake. And what they meant was that it was perceived to be fake. Like, fill this in, and just like we're going to take care of it. We're so sorry you have to go through this and that. And then the person you reported or the person that wronged you is just like, yeah, I don't know how to say it in English. It's like they take their own side. They're more protective of them than you. Next slide, please. There's also within the diaspora community, there's this intertwined challenges and resilience. So this is a participant who's also an established visual artist. So they're starting with feeling connected with diaspora community and leading to a sense of strength and connection. So what in my experience I've seen that it's not about the text or documentation or what you're writing or what's the statement. It is more about connection. But like, I feel comfortable here. And I'm talking with similar minded people. So the participants then goes on to share with us that they were in a mentorship program for newcomers and artists. And they shared with us that the mentorship curriculum structure of the program showed that it supports the minority marginalized community, including LGBTQ plus people. But they were surprised. Perhaps you may ask why. Because the organization was advising them not to reveal their queer identity. So I'm just going to pause here and repeat this for you again. So the same organization that was mentoring them and they're supposed to support them, they told them to don't reveal their queer identity. They went on to share that when they were part of that session and that mentorship program, they felt excluded and silenced about their queer identity. They further expanded, but because I think in my experience, that program actually secured me. Because there was, during the conversation, they said to me that don't say that you're queer because the art community in Canada is so small and is already small and you're queer, so you're like a particle. So this is a lot means, but I say that it's again, if you're working on something that you should be positive, you should play or discuss in a certain way that helps newcomer. And within that, I'm going to pass it to Hazal to talk about anti-immigrant sentiments.
Let's check if people hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, Hazal. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Okay, thanks, Roya. So as previously mentioned, we are employing the term migrant as opposed to just refugees or asylum seekers, refugee claimants, because in line with this quotation displayed in the slide, we believe that the difference between various types of migrants are less reflections of empirically verifiable differences among queer immigrants, who often shift from one category to another, than techniques of the nation state's power. Similarly, as Christina Clark-Kazak explains in her introduction to 2024 book, Forced Migration into Canada, people may move in and out of different migration categories, especially as governments change policies, laws, and programs, and migration processes have become more complex over time. For example, an international student may not be able to return to their home country because of war has broken out there. They may be forced to overstay their student visa, or they may make a refugee claim. Therefore, when we say anti-immigrant sentiments, we can think of a wide array of antagonistic, racist, xenophobic, classist, moralist, colorist discourses and attitudes directed towards people based on their real or perceived or changing migration status. These attitudes and behaviors can range from being benevolent, patronizing, infantilizing assumptions and treatment to outright overt forms of discrimination and hate. In his book, Real Queer Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, Refugees in the Canadian Refugee Apparatus, Mulé says this: victim of a foreign nation state with repressive, homo or transphobic laws, practices, and attitudes, the authentic, grateful LGBTQ refugee is rescued and given the gift of a socially legitimate and politically endorsed life, citizenship, based on his or her sexual orientation or gender identity by an enlightened democratic nation states like Canada or the United States, where such identities and orientations are ostensibly acceptable and protected. I think this quote from David Mulé captures this expectation very well. Of course, we need to re-emphasize that Mulé here is talking about refugees, while our term migrant encompasses a broader range of experiences. That being said, migrants who might have arrived in and remained in Canada via other migration trajectories face similar expectations as well, especially if they are visibly LGBTQ+. Whether one is an asylum seeker, a refugee, an international student, or a landed PR, there is a misguided and often there's a misguided understanding that Canadian government takes care of you. And this assumption often entails that you are taken care of, even though there are more deserving people than you, and that this happens at the expense of others, especially the citizens of the host country. Thus, one needs to be grateful and maybe feel indebted. This sentiment is expressed by one participant like this: at least no one is bombing you. You are safe. You are in Canada. I've been hearing this since day one, like I should be so grateful that I landed as PR. I am basically Canadian and the government gives me money. They think the government gives me money all the time. And when you are gay, they also assume that there is so much stuff for us and we are just really taken care of. But why does this matter? Is it not just a harmless assumption? For example, the Vancouver participant was sharing this exchange in the context of 2 job interviews in which the interviewers were people who, in quotation, struggled so much to get their PR. Therefore, we are talking about a situation in which assumptions around certain migration trajectories negatively affect the participants' access to opportunities and resources. Next slide, please. In our focus groups, the participants expressed that in addition to the larger Canadian society, they observed that anti-immigrant sentiments even seeping through the LGBTQ plus communities, negatively affecting their access to resources and opportunities, as you will see from the following quote. They don't accept you because of who you are, where you come from, basically. And like for me personally, I don't even come from Muslim background, but because I am Arab, these people assume I have been denied work opportunities and volunteering within my own community, the LGBT community, because of that, because of those assumptions. In addition to anti-immigrant sentiments, migrant LGBTQ plus people have to also deal with anti-LGBTQ plus sentiments. One participant shared a story around how their volunteering experience was negatively impacted by stereotypes around LGBTQ plus people being predatory. This person shared with us that they love volunteering and helping their community, but they also acknowledge that volunteering is supposed to get you a job. So in one instance, they volunteered as a translator in one organization, but as soon as one person found out they are gay, they treated this person as a predator. And they say, I was volunteering to interpret for people in Saskatchewan. And one of the workers, when she found out I was gay, she didn't want to let me there around people with kids. I'm just here to translate. Yeah, they just assume that we are all, perverts, and they don't want us to see children. As I hope this quotation makes it clear, the existing tropes around LGBTQ plus people as predators and perverts negatively affected this migrant queer person's volunteering opportunities, which could have then become for her a skill set to find further jobs. In this situation, we see how intersecting forms of marginalization limits this person's involvement in communities, which could be critical for migrants. Okay, thank you. In their recently published book, The Canadian Far-Right and Conspiracy Theories, Al-Rawi et al. Explains how right-wing extremist actors in Canada portray immigration and immigrants as national security problem often associating immigrants with criminality and violence, with some conspiracy theorists even going so far to use despicable names for immigrants. This is very important to touch upon because, as they say in their book, some Canadians do not even think right-wing extremism is really a Canadian issue. It is often taught as more of a USA issue rather than Canadian one. We hear from our participants that they are well aware of such discriminatory and dehumanizing rhetoric across the border within Canada. So they say, I think as Africans and Middle Easterns, media works strongly against us. We come to add something good to this country. We are not coming for violence. We are escaping from violence. Next slide, please. Okay. This following participant residing in Montreal speaks about one of the more prominent anti-immigrant talking points, which position immigrants as an economic burden and as lazy freeloaders, abusing the generosity of Canadian state and its taxpayers. But in fact, as touched upon earlier in our presentation, and this participant criticizes, this has to do with the complications ingrained in the immigration system and loss of educational and work credentials that make it difficult for immigrants to obtain employment. And the person says, people say, no, you're profiting from the government. You are taking advantage of the government because you are getting social assistance, like you are getting this free healthcare, you are getting this and that. It's the money that we are paying from our taxes, and you don't work, you don't do this, you don't do that, you do nothing. And it's not that. It's not that. We don't work because your system, your bureaucratic system, don't allow us to get job. Your bureaucratic system don't recognize our diplomas and our competences. Your immigration system stop us to get a permit for work in the fastest time possible. Your system don't allow us to be as productive as the rest of the society who were born here. Okay. So especially in the current rising anti-immigrant and anti-LGBTQ political shift, whatever support that is provided to immigrants are portrayed as an economical burden, and this quotation is illustrative of participants' understanding of that and their criticism. Next slide, please.
I think Nick has to mute, or can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay, wonderful. I'm very mindful of time, so I just maybe just briefly go over some of our very preliminary recommendation, and that includes mandatory training on trauma and violence-informed care. So I won't go into detail of that. Oftentimes we just hear trauma-informed care, but we encourage you to really look this up around the difference between trauma-informed care and trauma and violence-informed care for social and healthcare professionals. And these include pre-migration, post-migration, and these need to include intersecting experience of migrant LGBTQI+ individuals. We also suggest, based on what you heard from those experiences, that agencies must include clear policies to address and follow up racism, heteronormativity, and cisnormativity complaints that come forward. And we need to really ask our organizations to hear and also act upon those LGBTQI+ migrants' feedback, and try to get those through some safe and anonymous approach, because as you heard, they don't always feel safe to come in and voice this because they're getting some of these services, and then they're concerned around their name be associated or services not be given to them. Next slide, please. Some of the other recommendations is including holding policy is accountable for those who are lived and living realities. And we use the word living because for a lot is, even if you don't live in poverty anymore, those experiences continues with you, your migration status, your accents, for those who also were other identifying features, it stays with you. We also want to discuss intersectional policy approaches, must address compounded exclusions that are in play. And again, resettlement programs must be culture competent and identify affirming. And the housing and healthcare access must reflect the lived realities of LGBTQI+ migrants and not in silos, because oftentimes we hear from all these, we just named housing and healthcare, but all the dimensions of poverty that we speak about, it shouldn't be taught in silos. Oftentimes we hear from those who are in the care profession say that there's one week that we talk about migrants. There's another week that we talk about 2SLGBTQI communities, but we need to include intersection of those experiences as we engage in learning and teaching. And future work must go beyond tokenism to transformation. So rather than staying with, oh, we're going to include a person who identifies as, LGBTQI+ migrants, really meaningfully engage with this work and see how we can improve our programs and the support that we provide. And next slide, please. And that is our contact information. Please stay connected with us. We thank everybody online who have joined us. Apologies about the sound and the fun jazz of technology. Everybody in person, thank you for making a trip to come to York. And at this time, we will open it up for any questions, comments, and for the questions and comment sections, I don't know, Michelle, well, I can't remember the practice. Sometimes people feel more comfortable to ask questions when it's not recorded. Well, what is the practice? That's your second, if you could remind me.
We're going to stop recording now.